Welcome back in. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We are rolling through the NFL Draft Day edition of Outkick, and we are joined now by Jonathan Hutton of the Outkick 360. You just heard me give you my final top 10. Hutton, all week long, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I have been giving out my top 10 based on the absolute latest reading of all the drama, all the mock drafts, all the reports, all the trades, and everything else. And we finally will get a resolution to many of the questions that we have been asking for months now. Which team, Hutton, are you most interested to see what their pick is?
It's a great question, Clay. Good morning. And draft day's finally here. We've been through Atlanta and Cincinnati so much, not you and I, but just chatting.
Everybody. Everybody has.
Everybody. I feel like we have completely bypassed Detroit, who has so many needs. They picked 7th overall. No one's mentioning them for quarterback. There's a chance where we could see Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, 2 of those 3 still on the board at that position. I mean, there's an opportunity there for those guys to fall. And the assumption is they're just sticking with Goff, and that's it. Meanwhile, Garoppolo's getting paid the same type of money in San Francisco, and everyone has San Francisco with a backup quarterback behind Garoppolo that's eventually going to be the full-time starter. I wouldn't take quarterback off the board for Detroit. I think there's just so many different directions they could take that pick. I'm intrigued by what the Lions do, and they're in a great spot because practically the entire NFC East drafts right behind them at 10, 11, 12, and then the Washington wants to jump up as well. So they're in a great spot where Washington or some other teams in the NFC East are going to be trying to hop over the top of like a team like Dallas or Philly to get a receiver.
Yeah, it is an intriguing spot that they find themselves in. And you're right, because, first of all, you didn't even mention it a lot, but we haven't even seen Dan Campbell draft really and have an idea of exactly what he's trying to demonstrate. Because sometimes first-year coaches, that first pick that they take is indicative of the kind of culture or the kind of organization that they're trying to build, because it helps to send a message about what they value. And there are likely to be a lot of different angles they can go, because I think if you read and look at the way things are going, I feel pretty good about Trevor Lawrence 1, Zach Wilson 2, Mac Jones 3. I feel I would be very surprised at this point if Kyle Pitts doesn't go 4 and if Jamar Chase doesn't go 5. Do you agree with most of those first 5?
I do. I think you're on with the first 5, but you hit on a great point with Dan Campbell, but also Brad Holmes is the new general manager in Detroit. But think about how the top 10 stacks up with just the unknowns of the pairings of head coach and general manager. We know Urban Meyer is going Trevor Lawrence, with Trent Baalke as the new general manager there. Joe Douglas is now paired with new head coach Robert Saleh and with New York and the Jets. You mentioned Arthur Smith in Atlanta going with Kyle Pitts, new general manager Terry Fontenot there. Duke Tobin in Cincinnati with head coach Zach Taylor. But beyond Detroit, Matt Rule and Scott Fitterer in Carolina, George Payton, the new GM in Denver. I mean, there are so many new faces making calls at the top of this draft. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how we think these trends will line up, because there's really no track record of these guys together and what they've been through in the draft room, on top of a year where it's really hard to evaluate these guys during the COVID season.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. Now, a lot of people trying to read into the decision by the Panthers to trade Teddy Bridgewater to Denver. Were you surprised by that move? What does it tell you about what both the Carolina Panthers, who are sitting at 8, and the Denver Broncos, who are sitting at 9, might do?
They're either drafting a quarterback, Clay, Denver, and they're going to have Drew Lock on the trade option this weekend, or we're going to see them continue to add some pieces around their quarterback room, and they're truly going in with the idea that Bridgewater can compete with Lock. But it confirms everything we were talking about with Denver and their uncertainty at the quarterback position. And they get Bridgewater for practically what the Tennessee Titans traded and gave up for Ryan Tannehill a few years ago, where the team that they traded with is paying the majority of the salary to begin with. and the cost and draft picks and everything else. I mean, it's a great deal for Denver, and it still leaves them with flexibility at the position if they choose to stay. And if Fields, for instance, falls to them at number 9, what they could do with Justin Fields in the room and still have some capital to trade Drew Lock if they so choose, or keep the battle open. I think there's plenty of different directions to go. They could use some help on defense too, and by making this trade, they can they could be the first team in the top 10 to go defense. And if it's a slim chance, but if we don't see any defensive players taken in the top 10, it'll be the first time in NFL draft history that's the case. Denver puts themselves by making this move in a position where they can add some pieces around the quarterback position if another team trades ahead of them.
To me, and I talked about this to open the show, when I saw this move by Carolina and Denver, who you figure are talking quite a bit back and forth, it meant to me that Denver has basically decided that whatever price they would have to pay to trade up is too substantial, and that they find it highly unlikely that somebody is going to fall to them, right? And so it makes me think that there are lots of discussions going on about somebody jumping maybe above, or that there's a conversation behind the scenes and the Panthers are like, hey, we're going to take Trey Lance or Justin Fields if they're there. I don't know that they would have had that conversation for sure, but it makes me feel like the Panthers are clearing out a spot and that the Broncos are sort of resigning themselves to the idea that they aren't going to be able to get one of these young quarterbacks. And they may not have loved them. So I'm kind of curious, like, how would you read this if you are Sam Darnold, who the Panthers just traded for? Are you thinking, okay, this is a sign that I am the guy, the Panthers are 100% committed to me? Or do you think he is now thinking, oh, maybe they're going to go out and actually draft a young guy? Because remember, the crazy thing is, and Dub, you can look this up and confirm it. You may know it off the top of your head. We're talking to Jonathan Hutton, Outkick 360. I think that Sam Darnold is still only 23 years old. He was super young when he came into the league, and I think he's still only 23. So the idea, like, this is crazy, but some of the guys they could potentially draft, like Mac Jones, I think is basically, he may be older than Sam Darnold already, right? So to me, going and getting a young quarterback doesn't make a lot of sense when you've already got a super young quarterback in Sam Darnold.
Yeah, he turns 24 in June. Sam Darnold does.
Yeah.
And look, if I'm Sam Darnold, I look at this as a sign of investment. And there's some writing on the wall here, even though we don't know exactly what their new general manager is going to do. You have an offensive-minded head coach in Matt Rule who just traded for the guy, picked up a big salary, and reading the tea leaves when the trade was made, and I said this on Outkick 360, it made a lot of sense because we are viewing Sam Darnold through the Adam Gase coaching lens, which was not great with the New York Jets. And you pair him in Carolina with an offensive-minded team in a direction that they're going, on top of the fact that you already have Christian McCaffrey and some other pieces. I tend to think they use the pick, if they stay at number 8, Clay, on either Patrick Surtain, or they go offensive tackle with a Rashawn Slater type of pick in that spot. They could also go receiver there. Or their new general manager comes from Seattle. He's from that same tree. Seahawks, they are known for trading back, known for trying to collect more picks. And I won't be surprised after trading Bridgewater, and with you mentioned Denver being on the phone with them, Denver thinking that some other team is getting ahead of them for a quarterback, they traded with the team that may be trading out at pick number 8, with other teams trying to get ahead of, or try to get into the top 10 to get the quarterback that slips to that position. And there's no certainty on which quarterback that's going to be. So if you're the Broncos, you went with the sure thing instead of sitting to wait and see how things fell.
By the way, Sam Darnold is younger than Joe Burrow. So he's already played. I mean, that kind of puts it in perspective, right? He's already played 3 full seasons in the NFL. Joe Burrow obviously has played 10 games, but Sam Darnold still younger than Joe Burrow, which I think you have to factor in. I'm sure Carolina did in a big way when they decided to trade for him. But if they go and get, let's say, a Justin Fields, or if they go and get a Trey Lance, they're not getting that much younger at the quarterback position. They're basically going college football style, if that were the case, and allowing those guys to battle it out and figure out who the best quarterback is. And obviously they don't have that much invested at this point in time in Sam Darnold, because they can choose whether or not to kind of keep that option going with him. But he hasn't cost that much to them in the grand scheme of things. I'm really intrigued to see what they do going forward now.
Well, and just to tie it in back to Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold, younger than Joe Burrow, and is playing for Joe Burrow's former passing game coordinator at LSU, Joe Brady. So
that's a great point.
Joe Brady and Matt Rule around him, better offensive coaches than what we've seen from Adam Gase, better quarterback coaches over the course of what we've seen, whether albeit college, what we've seen compared to what we've seen with the New York Jets. So Darnold has to be. It needs to be. I think that the viewpoint would be it's refreshing to get out of New York, and with an organization that has some talented players, and it has invested all last year. Their entire draft was defense. So I think the idea would be to try to get some pieces and get the second best receiver, because Chase should be gone by the time Carolina drafts. The second best receiver could be on the board. Also offensive tackle, where they're in need of some help to protect them.
I've been thinking that the Dolphins, and I talked about this to start the show, might be in the trade realm again. I know they've already made a lot of different moves, but it seems to me like they were likely targeting Jamar Chase, who was I think, presumptive number one wide receiver on almost everybody's board. Assuming that the Bengals take Chase, which seems increasingly likely, what should the Dolphins do at 6? I mean, they'll have Penei Sewell, they've got Slater, they could go grab a big tackle and try to protect Tua. They could go ahead and say, okay, we didn't get Jamar Chase, we like Jalen Waddle. They could trade back and see if there's anybody really interested in Trey Lance or in Justin Fields, presuming that both of those guys are still on the board. What do you think it's likely that we see the Dolphins do at 6?
I think they should get another weapon for Tua.
Yeah.
With the investment that they're saying that they've made in him last year, and then sticking with him, regardless of the struggles that we saw him have. I think they go Waddle, or do they go Devontae Smith? I don't think he goes that high, but two different types of receivers between the two, from Alabama. Waddle, though, to me gives them more options. They can be more creative with him, and he's been compared a bit to Tyreek Hill with the stop and start ability.
Yeah,
and how he runs across the field. So that makes sense. But also offensive line and Penei Sewell. If the Bengals pass on Jamar Chase, the pick would be between Sewell and Waddle, at least for me, because you're directly helping Tua Tagovailoa.
That's right. What do you think the read on Tua has to be, in all honesty, with Brian Flores and his regime in Miami? I know they let Ryan Fitzpatrick leave. But if you ask them to give Tua a grade relative not only to what the grade that he earned, but what their expectations for Tua were, how do you think they assessed his first season, his rookie campaign in Miami?
I mean, probably a C. I mean, I'm trying to be fair to both sides there, because they didn't start the season with him. They also had no off season with him. So it's tough to gauge, but the investment by making the pick that they did with the investment as high as it was, he deserves longer than a season or two to get it right, and so do the Dolphins for that matter. But the way the Dolphins have set things up with future first round picks, they need to invest that capital into making Tua Tagovailoa the best quarterback he can be within that offense, and not sell the assets that they've tried to obtain before they even get out of the gate. And also, Clay, interesting. This was posed to me by a friend of mine last night. If you were setting odds in Vegas right now on the Alabama quarterback from that trio, from that quarterback room, with what we've seen from him, Hurts, and Mac Jones, which of the three has the best NFL career? We've had a glimpse of Tua. We've barely seen Hurts, and we've yet to see Mac Jones, who's expected to go to the 49ers with Shanahan. To me, it's a tough call.
It's a good question. I think you have to go Mac Jones because I think the uncertainty of how he might do relative to what we saw from Jalen Hurts and from Tua makes me more optimistic than Mac Jones because I'm just not super optimistic based on what we saw in their first seasons, in what we saw out of Jalen Hurts or in what we saw out of Tua. So I think if you were just having to make a wager on which of those three is going to have the more productive NFL career, I would go with Mac Jones right now.
But the idea against Mac Jones is if we were pairing him just with this quarterback class, just on pure how we would rank quarterback, quote-unquote, talent going into tonight's draft, whenever we started this process and started chatting about the five that would go in the first round, he was listed fifth, right? Of just how we would rank them. But yet, in the small glimpse that we've seen from him in Alabama, we would project him as having the best NFL career over the other two. And it's a bit...
Well, here's a good question for you. What odds would you have had to give Hutton in order for Tua, if he were going to be drafted lower in his draft class than Mac Jones? I mean, that's the wild one to me. If you had told anybody last year, anybody last year in October, when Tua, the October of 19 as opposed to 20.
19.
If you had told anybody before Tua injures his hip, right, because that kind of threw a little bit of a difficulty into Tua in terms of where he was going to end up going. But if you had told anybody in October of 2019, hey, Mac Jones is going to end up a higher draft pick at quarterback than Tua, that would have gotten, like if I'd said that on my radio show, hey, I know Tua's like Heisman Trophy favorite. It's October. The Alabama Crimson Tide are rolling. But I think that Tua is going to end up drafted lower in his draft class than Mac Jones will be. People would have said that was an absolutely absurd argument to make. And by the way, 2019 was a fun year overall because if you had said coming into the season, hey, Joe Burrow's going to end up the unquestioned number one draft pick, a lot of people would have laughed you out of the room, and that's just how incredible he was in 2019 to think about that. I'll say this too, Hutton. You watch the NFL. What's old often becomes new again. And a lot of people are saying, hey, Mac Jones, he's not mobile necessarily. He's not able to scramble. He's not necessarily going to have that elite-level mobility when the plays break down. But Peyton Manning can't do anything in the pocket. Tom Brady can't do anything in the pocket. Drew Brees really didn't do any. I mean, outside of the pocket. These are pocket passing quarterbacks. Ben Roethlisberger, by and large, that was the trend in the NFL for a very long time. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity for a guy who is still a statue if he's accurate enough to be able to make plays. And I wonder on some level whether that's what Kyle Shanahan is thinking. My offense is so good, I don't need a guy who's going to go off script. I need a guy who's just going to run my script. And I think that's ultimately if Kyle Shanahan makes the play to go grab Mac Jones, I think that's what he's saying. This is not just a investment in Mac Jones. It's really an investment by Kyle Shanahan in the system that he's created.
Well, and that's why no matter who they select tonight, that we will be thinking that they'll have success with Shanahan because it's Shanahan's system and his script, right? Like, we know his track record of quarterbacks that he's worked with, and the idea would be this: what's old is new, and what's new is old. But also, like from the quarterback just discussion here, I oftentimes we're looking for someone who goes off script and makes all these great plays when the defense takes something away. But I think we've undervalued the quarterback who realizes that the defense took the first couple of options away. Yeah. And Mac Jones is really good at that. He knows when a play isn't there. When the route concept that they're trying to set up, the defense has a great play call against it, and what he chooses to do. And I think there is great value in that, especially with Shanahan's play-action system. I see reasons why Mac Jones would be the pick. We've discussed in previous weeks why Justin Fields makes a lot of sense with the bootleg options and different things that they can do with him within Shanahan's system. But you bring up a great point about Shanahan's system. It's the coach and the offense that these guys are going to be put in more than it is just pure individual talent, because the systems oftentimes set up the quarterback for early success.
Jonathan Hutton, looking forward to seeing your reaction with the Outkick 360 crew and more to finally the NFL draft being here. Appreciate the time, my man. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Clay. I'll be listening to the rest of the show.
I appreciate that. That is Jonathan Hutton. You can follow him on Twitter. You can also watch him with the Outkick 360 every single day. He's doing fantastic work there.